Welcome to HUD's online training series on the Integrated Disbursement and Information System, also known as IDIS, for the Housing Trust Fund Program. In this training, we'll go over IDIS reports and ways to use them to administer your HTF program. IDIS reports reflect data that has been entered into IDIS by the grantee. This makes them a very useful tool for monitoring the status of your HTF projects, spotting any potential data entry errors, or identifying areas where your program may be out of compliance with various HTF regulations. For example, IDIS has an HTF-specific report to help you track your progress towards meeting your HTF commitment and expenditure deadlines. There are also financial reports available that provide helpful information on your HTF grants as well as your HTF accomplishments. Users can access reports in IDIS by selecting the Reports tab in the top right corner of the window. From MicroStrategy, users can view and export reports in Excel or PDF. There are a number of HTF reports available in IDIS. This training will review the 5 most commonly used HTF reports. First, we'll go over the purpose of each report and its contents. Then we will give examples of how the reports can be used to answer common questions. As a reminder, HUD periodically publishes some HTF reports on the HUD Exchange website. Keep in mind, however, that while these are the same reports available in MicroStrategy, they are typically only updated monthly, whereas the MicroStrategy reports are updated daily and current as of the prior business day. Let's start with the PR 108 HTF Deadline Compliance Status Report. The PR 108 report summarizes the grantee's progress toward meeting the 24-month commitment and 5-year expenditure requirements for its HTF funds. Let's take a look at a PR 108 report to review the deadline compliance status for a 2019 HTF grant. There are 3 important fields to take note of on this report. The deadline date column shows the date all 2019 grant funds must be committed to meet the 24-month commitment requirement, and the date these funds must be fully disbursed to meet the 5-year expenditure requirement. Keep in mind that unlike home, the deadline date is not always the end of the month. Each grantee's commitment and expenditure deadline is based on the obligation date of the HTF grant, which can be found on the grant screen in IDIS. The total through deadline column shows how much of a grantee's HTF funds are already committed and disbursed. And the shortfall column shows the remaining amount of HTF funds a grantee must commit and disburse in order to meet their commitment and expenditure deadline requirements. Remember, this report measures HTF commitments and disbursements entered in IDIS, so it's important to make sure your data in IDIS is correct and up to date in order to ensure that the PR 108 has an accurate picture of your deadline compliance status. Now let's go over how to read the PR 108.
Hi, Jordan. When is the deadline for spending our 2019 HTF funds?
To answer this question, look for the date listed under the deadline date column next to the disbursements row. Here you can see that you have until July 12, 2024 to spend all of your 2019 HTF funds. This report also shows how much in 2019 HTF funds still need to be expended by the deadline.
Jordan, how much of our 2019 HTF funds do we still need to commit?
To answer this question, locate the amount under the shortfall column next to the commitments row. Here you can see that the state still has to commit about $9.5 million of 2019 HTF funds by July 12, 2021, in order to meet the commitment requirement. The PR 108 provides a lot of useful information. Regularly reviewing this report will help to keep you from losing funds unnecessarily due to not meeting your commitment and expenditure deadlines. Next, let's review the PR 105 Status of HTF Activities Report. The PR 105 report provides an at-a-glance view of all your HTF activities across all grant years. This report includes information on the type of activity, its status, and its funding, as well as other helpful information. There are 4 important fields to take note of in this report. The Activity Status column shows the status of an activity in IDIS. Activities can be open, canceled, or completed. The HTF Units column shows the number of HTF-assisted units for this activity. The Committed Amount column provides information on the activity funding. The Drawn Amount column shows the amount of HTF funds spent on the activity. For these types of questions, exporting this report in the Excel format is the best option because users can easily sort, filter, and sum the data without having to perform manual calculations. The PR 105 is useful for providing an overview of your HTF projects. You can use it to quickly determine what projects are currently underway, what projects have been completed, and what you've committed and expended in HTF funds to date by project. Now let's talk about the different ways you can use the PR 105.
Hi, Jordan. How many HTF projects are currently underway, and how much HTF funds have we committed to those projects?
To answer this question, first add a filter to the row which contains the column headers. Next, go to the Activity Status column and filter for activities in Open Status. In this example, there are 8 activities currently underway. To determine the amount that has been committed to these projects, sum the amounts displayed under the Committed Amount column. In this case, the grantee has committed approximately $6.5 million across the 8 projects that are underway.
Jordan, how many HTF projects have been completed? How many HTF units were created as a result? And how much HTF funds were spent on those projects?
To answer this question, first go to the Activity Status column and filter for activities in Completed Status. In this example, there are 5 projects that have been completed. Next, sum the amounts in the HTF Units column. In this scenario, the grantee has completed 28 HTF units. To determine the amount that was spent on these projects, sum the amounts displayed under the Drawn Amount column. In this case, the grantee spent nearly $3 million on these 5. Next, let's review the PR 106 HTF Vacant Units report. The PR 106 identifies HTF-assisted units that are missing beneficiary data. HTF rental projects are considered complete once construction is finished, but prior to occupancy. This means that grantees can complete an HTF rental activity in IDIS prior to finding an eligible tenant to occupy the unit. However, grantees are still required to ensure that an eligible tenant occupies the unit as soon as possible, and it is the grantee's responsibility to enter this beneficiary information into IDIS in a timely manner. The PR 106 is a useful tool that will help you keep track of these HTF activities that still need beneficiary information entered. Let's take a closer look at the PR 106 report. Here are a few important fields to take note of on this report. The IDIS Activity ID column identifies the IDIS Activity ID of the HTF project that is missing beneficiary information. For these rental units, in this example, the unit number identifies the specific unit within the HTF project that is missing beneficiary information. The completion date shows when the HTF activity was completed. Now let's go over how to use the PR 106 report.
Hi, Jordan. Can you please find out which HTF projects still need occupancy data in IDIS?
Let's start by identifying the IDIS activity IDs of the HTF project or projects that are missing beneficiary data. It looks like all of the vacant HTF units are in a single HTF project, part of activity 18909. We can look at the unit number column to figure out which of the specific units are missing beneficiary data. According to this report, units 1, 2, 3, and 4 need to have beneficiary data entered into IDIS. We can also see from this report that this HTF project was completed a while ago, so it's a good idea to check with some coworkers to see why all beneficiary data is missing, and to see if some follow-up with the owner of the project is necessary to get this missing data. Next, let's review the PR 107 HTF Open Activities Report. The PR 107 report identifies all HTF activities that are in open status in IDIS. This report is useful for tracking the progress of HTF projects that are currently underway. Here are some important fields to take note of. The IDIS Activity ID column identifies the IDIS Activity ID of the Open HTF project. The Initial Funding Date column shows the date this HTF project was first funded in IDIS. The Funded Amount column shows the amount of HTF funds committed for the project. The Percent Drawn column shows how much of the HTF funds committed to the project have been drawn. This could be an indicator of how close the project is to completion. Now let's go over some different ways you can use the PR 107 report. You've been asked to prepare a memo on the status of your HTF projects. First, let's see how many HTF projects we currently have underway. According to this report, we have 10 projects in open status. And based on the initial funding date, some of these projects are fairly new, while others have been underway for a year or more. Next, let's see if any of these HTF projects might be nearing completion. We can use the Percent Drawn column to estimate the progress of an HTF project. HTF projects that are fully dispersed or close to it are the most likely to be the closest to completion. In this example, there are 5 projects that show a portion of the funds have been drawn. More specifically, 90% of the HTF funds committed to IDIS Activity ID 44774 have been drawn. Since nearly all the funds have been drawn, this project may be nearing completion. Once the final draw has been made for this activity and no funds remain to be drawn, the state should complete the activity in IDIS in a timely manner. Maybe you also want to include in your memo the total amount of HTF funds you have committed to these underway HTF projects. To determine the amount of HTF funds committed to open activities, sum the amounts under the Funded Amount column. In this example, $19.5 million of HTF funds have been committed to these 10 open HTF projects. Finally, let's review the PR 109 Status of HTF Grants report. The PR 109 is a financial summary report that provides a wealth of information for each HTF grant, including data on commitments and disbursements by grant year and fund type. The first page of this report provides an overall summary of HTF commitments by grant year. Using this page of the report with the PR 108 HTF Deadline Compliance Status Report will give you the most complete picture of the status of your HTF commitments. Here are some important fields to take note of. On the Commitments from Authorized Funds table, the Total Authorization column shows the amount of your HTF grant for that year. The Admin Authorization column shows you the authorized amount of your AD subfund for that year. HUD counts the full amount of your AD subfund as committed for the purposes of HTF deadline compliance, regardless of whether it has been committed to an administration activity in IDIS. You do not have to use 10% of your HTF grant on administration. However, reducing the amount of your AD subfund will uncommit those AD funds in the system. The Total Authorized Commitments column shows the amount of HTF funds that have been committed for that grant year. Now let's go over different ways we can use the PR 109 report.
Hi, Jordan. How much HTF funds did we receive in 2016?
On the Commitments from Authorized Funds table, under the Total Authorization column, you will see approximately $4.8 million of HTF funds were awarded to the state in 2016.
Jordan, how much of our HTF funds from 2016 can be used for admin?
On the Commitments from Authorized Funds table, under the Admin Authorization column, you will see that nearly $480,000 of HTF funds have been authorized for admin expenses for the 2016 grant year. Each page of the PR 109 features each fund type, and we can look at that specific page that covers AD for administration to see the amount that can still be used for admin. The PR 109 may seem intimidating at first, but this report is a powerful tool that will help you manage your HTF grants. Congratulations! You have completed the Using IDIS reports to administer your HTF program module. Additional resources on the Housing Trust Fund program and IDIS are available on the HUD Exchange, including a link to the commitment and expenditure deadline requirements for the HTF program notice, which you may find helpful. You can access the IDIS Ask a Question desk if you have additional questions. You are now ready to move on to one of the additional training modules featured in this online training.